multiple emails from people asking me the very worst question you can ever ask a teacher. What do you think that is?
Is this going to be on the quiz?
How do you know? How can you hurt your teacher's feelings? Very easily. What question do you ask them? Come on, many of you already sent me emails about this. What do we need to know for the exams? What do we need to study? And why does that hurt the teacher's feelings? Because teachers like to think that this course, or any course for any teacher, is the most important thing in your life. And that the teacher is exciting you and stimulating you, and you're going to want to learn everything in the course. That's what we like to think. And when it's suddenly made aware to us that that might not be the case, when we get questions like, what do we need to know, then our feelings get hurt. So, in spite of the fact that my feelings have been hurt, I will try to answer that question for you. Only because I am the third different teacher in this class, and because my lectures do not closely follow the textbook. So, I will tell you how to study for the exam. What you need to know depends upon why you are taking this class. This is a Gen Ed class for non-majors. If you're just taking this class to get rid of a requirement and you just want to do the minimum amount of work, I would say all you need to do is study the lecture notes for my part of the course. 90+% of the questions will be answerable from the lecture notes. So that means you take good notes during class, and so far you've been good, and I will be posting this weekend the notes for the first 2 lectures. You can go over that. And that's almost all you need to do if you just want to do the minimum amount. However, if any of you are interested in the material being presented, are considering going on in biology at all, I would also read the text. Okay, especially parts of the text that I do not cover in lecture. Last chance for me to ever hear this question again this semester. Any questions about what you need to do for my section of the course? Okay, so you all know, whether depending upon why you're taking this course, what you need to do. Okay, so last lecture, some of the main points that we covered is that, yes, indeed, bone is alive. Just as alive as any other part of your body. The blood, the brain, the muscles that we're going to talk about today. Bone is alive. It is made up of cells. And there are 4 types of cells in the bone, and you should know what they are and what they do. As a result of having living cells in the bone, it also has a blood supply, and it also makes contact with the nervous system. Just like any other part of the body. Okay? Also, just like any other part of the body, which we started discussing at the end, bone is dynamic. It is continuously being broken down and dissolved by what kind of cells? Osteo what? Osteoclast. If you don't know this right now, you're not studying correctly for this course. The way to study for this course is you go home tonight, like you should have gone home Tuesday night, and go over your lecture notes. Learn the new words that you didn't know before. Because each lecture assumes that you're familiar and already learned what came before. So if you can't answer these questions like that, you are not studying appropriately. You should make sure you go home at night and go over your notes. Okay, dynamic. Osteoclasts are for continuously breaking down bone. And at the same time that the bone is being broken down, it's being rebuilt by what kind of cells? Osteoblasts. Blast-filled clasts break down. Okay, this is taking place during, we said, repair of injury, but also all the time. Continuous breakdown, continuous being built up. As a result of this dynamics, bone is plastic. That means the maintenance of the bone depends upon physical factors in the environment. It depends upon mechanical stress. Parts of the bone that are more force on them, either from weight above, or as the example I showed before, a tennis player who is continuously using a racket to exert a lot of force on her bones. Those bones that are under more force are going to grow wider and be stronger than those bones that are not exerted under force. It's the old use it or lose it. If you don't use your bones a lot, they're going to start to dissolve and get smaller and smaller. This was one of the major problems that the NASA program faced in sending human beings out into space, where they're in a zero-gravity environment. There is no force being exerted on their bones. And in just a few days in outer space, the astronauts' bones started dissolving. Okay, so it's a very dynamic process. Here, a bone gets thicker through use of a lot of force. Astronauts, through insufficient force, have their bones being lost. Now, this is something that scientists have discovered fairly recently. This idea about dynamic properties of bones. Very recent discovery by science, but it is something that has been known for thousands of years by many other human civilizations. For example, skeletons have been discovered in ancient Egypt and in Mesopotamia that have very unusual skulls. Pointed skulls. Some investigators have looked at these skeletons and said, oh, it's obvious that we were visited by aliens from outer space in the past. And these skeletons have been cited as evidence for this. Oh, no human has a skull shaped like that. This must be an alien. Okay? However, further investigation of these societies has found that human societies very rapidly learned how to change the shape of the skulls. Here's a very young child being raised in a platform like this that is continuously pressing against the skull. That different force is going to mold the skull, cause that extended shape. Well, look at the mother. And here's another alternative way of molding the skull to have a particular shape. Here's another very interesting example of past use of bone plasticity, and that is the binding of feet in China. For about 1,000 years, from 900 AD to about 1900 AD, for 1,000 years, women in China had, starting when they were very young, had their feet broken by being slammed with a hammer. The bones in their feet were broken with a hammer and then wrapped up very tightly in cloth to make them assume this kind of shape. So this was the shape of the feet. This is the normal shape of a feet. Here's a photograph of what it looks like. Why did they do this? Well, they did this, first of all, so that the feet would fit into a shoe that's 3 inches long. Okay? Molding, plasticity of the bones. But it required repetitive hammering of the feet, breaking of the bones, rebinding it. Very painful. Why did young girls and women put up with this? Well, for one thing, this was considered to be a sign of prestige. Higher class women might have had their feet bound. Servants maybe didn't. Feminist scholars look at this now and interpret this phenomenon as being an attempt of Chinese society in this time to restrict the movement of women in order to make them more controlled by men. That's Western feminist scholars looking back at this past phenomenon. Bone plasticity. They know about bone plasticity. Now, the third, and maybe the most likely explanation for this, is that Chinese men at this time found this really hot. They got really turned on by these bizarre feet. It was very sexually attractive. And we all know what one society considers attractive, another society might not. Totally arbitrary. So, Chinese men at this time really got off on that. And their women had to have bound feet. One more example of bone plasticity, which is seen today in Africa and Thailand, the use of these spiral metal rings to make women look like this. This is an example of bone plasticity, but it's not as obvious as it appears. They're not really making the neck long, even though it looks like that. What's happening is shoulders. These rings are pressing against the shoulders. So you can assume that everyone try. You push your shoulders down and it makes it look like your neck is up higher. That's what's happening here. It is an example of bone plasticity, but it's more the shoulder bones that are being affected. And it gives the illusion of having a longer neck, which again is an example of probably prestige in these cultures. Okay, so bone is very plastic. And this essentially concludes all the material I want to talk about on the skeletal system. And if you understand this, you will be able, here's your final question on skeletal system. See if you can answer this question. There is a called osteoporosis, which affects 10 million people severely in this country, which is of such consequence that half of all women over 50 years of age will break a bone because of this disorder. Okay, look around the room, women. Half of you, by the time you are over 50, will break a bone because of this disorder. So, what happens in this disorder? Bones become very weak. They are easily broken. And the question I have to ask you is twofold. Can you come up with a reason of what's happening at the cellular level, at the molecular level, to produce the weakening of the bones, based on what you know about how bone forms, how bone is plastic and gets stronger and wider as force is put on it? What could be causing osteoporosis? So we want to know cause, and based on what you choose as your cause, can you come up with a treatment? And we will make this a hypothetical treatment, since really good treatments do not yet exist. Bones are dynamic. It's a breaking down and building up. There is a balance of this to keep your bones normal and healthy. What's happening when bones get weaker? What's happening to that balance? What do you think? Could be, but what's happening to the balance? Okay, well, there is a shift in the balance. There is a shift in the balance. A shift to favor breakdown of bone. Now, what causes breakdown? As you said, it could be increased activity of osteoclasts. Other things that contribute to this. What else can cause an increased activity in osteoclasts? We talked about, if you don't remember this, go back to your notes. Parathyroid hormone released in response to low calcium levels. Any one of these could cause this shift in balance and make bones get weaker. In other words, activating this. Or on the other hand, you could decrease activity of the osteoblasts. Okay? Balance. Normal state is the appropriate balance. Something happens as we age to shift that balance. Well, most of us are still fully active at 50 years of age, so it's not activity, it's not force, it's something molecularly. And the fact that this happens much more severely to women after menopause suggests something hormonal. Menopause is when women stop ovulating. There is less of the female hormone, and we'll talk about this in more detail later, less estrogen being produced. This suggests that in women, normally, in all of you now, the estrogen levels that you are producing is helping to maintain the balance. That estrogen, your bones are interacting with a hormone released from your ovaries. That this hormone is maintaining osteoclast activity, keeping osteoclast relatively inactive, so that breakdown is not proceeding very rapidly. And now I'll leave it up to you in terms of these kinds of things that cause osteoporosis. How would you treat this? Whoops. We talked about interactions between cells, chemical signals. One consequence of communication between parts of the body being chemical is that there is a certain way of treating malfunctions in cell communication. What's the major way we treat diseases today? You go to a doctor, what are they most likely to do? Give you a medicine, give you a drug. Medicine, drugs are chemicals. Chemicals that affect communication between cells. Chemicals that affect the function of these networks of cells. Okay, so you can have drugs, and we'll talk about this in more detail later. We can have drugs that increase communication if it's too low normally. We have drugs that can inhibit communication if communication is too great. Okay, so with that in mind, think about treatments that you could use for osteoporosis. Okay, now I want to start on the second organ system that we will be talking about, the muscular system. And we are going to follow the same sort of guidelines. We're going to talk about function of the muscular system. We're going to talk about structure. And this is one of the most fun parts of the body to talk about, because we know the structure in so much detail. We know structure at the whole tissue level. We know structure at the cellular level. We know structure at the subcellular level, the organelles. We know structure at the molecular level. And the interesting thing is we can put these studies at these 4 different levels together to give us a very detailed picture of the structure of the muscle system and to explain how it functions. And like every other part of the body, muscle, as we will see, is dynamic and has great plasticity. As all of you who go to the gym and exercise every day, like you all should know. There's plasticity in the muscle system. Okay, now I think you've heard this before already in the class. There are 3 types of muscle. Cardiac muscle, found only in the heart. Smooth muscle, found lining the internal organs, lining the digestive system, lining the blood vessels. And then there is skeletal muscle. Okay, today we are going to limit ourselves only to skeletal muscle. Because you've already talked a bit about cardiac muscle and you've already talked a bit about smooth muscle. So skeletal muscle is what we're going to limit ourselves to. Well, let's look at the skeletal muscles, the skeletal muscular system. It is quite extensive. There are over 700 skeletal muscles in your body. It is the largest of our organ systems and makes up anywhere between 30 and 40% of our body weight. Muscular systems are huge. There are also a great many muscles in the face, in our head. Why do you think muscles in our face? What do we need muscles in our face for? Yeah? Huh? For facial expressions, yeah. Why do we need to make facial expressions? Communication. We are a social animal. And we haven't talked about that much yet in this class. But the drive to interact with other people has exerted a lot of force on our evolution and our development. We have evolved to be expert communicators. One very obvious way we communicate is through facial expression. And a lot of the time, we're not even consciously aware that somebody else's facial expression is affecting us. So some days I'll walk out after lecture and I'll feel just lousy. And why is it? Because I was surrounded by blank faces. The facial expression of people who couldn't care less or didn't understand the thing I'm saying. I guess that's why. I don't know. It doesn't affect you consciously. Sometimes I walk out of class, like I will today, feeling great because everybody's eyes are wide awake, they're smiling, they're paying attention, nobody is falling asleep. And you're not even aware that you're doing that. And I might not even be aware that you're doing that, but your facial communication, the contraction of these muscles in your faces, sends signals to other people, affects how they feel and how they behave. We also use muscle to control the movement of the tongue, essential for verbal communication also. That we do mostly consciously. Okay, so that's the muscular system. 700 plus muscles scattered throughout the body. What does it do? Okay, well, last time we talked about muscles hold bones together. And this might not be the exact same picture I showed last time, but here's a muscle attached to the shoulder bone and attached to a forearm bone, helping the skeletal system assemble, helping hold it together. Muscles help to hold bones together. Function number 1. Function number 2. Let's skip to, I'm going to move these around. Function number 2, posture of the body. How we hold ourselves when we stand, how we hold ourselves when you're sitting. You should see the amazing variety. Just look around, look at the different positions people have when they're sitting in their seats. Almost no two people the same. How we hold our body, which is called our body posture, is determined by the muscles that we have and how those muscles are used. Another example of functions of skeletal muscle, which Dr. Frisch talked about, is homeostasis. In particular, temperature homeostasis. Negative feedback loops of interactions between multiple parts of the body that are used to keep the body temperature constant. If the body gets cold, parts of the brain detect that it's cold, send signals to muscles, and what do those muscles do? They shake, they shiver, they're contracting, as we'll talk about. What that does is generate heat, increases metabolism in the muscles, and it's the release of the heat from the shivering muscles